So I'm in Essex, England today, and I've come here to see a castle that was sold for scrap. It is a castle that was built in the 1200s, 1215 to be exact, and then later on, about 300 years later, it was actually sold for scrap. And but today bits of the castle is remaining, so I'm here to see the castle, or what is remaining of it. So I think I'm here at the entrance now. There you go. So that is the entrance. Let's go and check out this information board. That's the castle we are going to see, Hadleigh Castle, and the romantic ruins of a royal castle. Yes. As I said earlier, Hadleigh was begun after 1215 by Hubert de Burgh, but was extensively refortified by Edward III. So Edward III actually reigned during the 100 Years' War. And opening times, any reasonable time? I think it's a reasonable time now, so let's go and check it out. Let's go in and see. It should be around the corner here. Okay, here it is. Here's the castle, or rather the ruins of the castle. So as you saw on that board, this was initially built in 1215, and afterwards it was heavily fortified by Edward III. So as that board said, Edward III reigned during the 100 Years' War. For those of you who don't know what the 100 Years' War was, it was a war that was fought between the English and the French, and the war lasted for not 100 years, although it is called the 100 Years' War. It actually lasted for 116 years. So Edward III is the one who actually built this into a proper castle. But then later on, after Edward III's reign, this passed on from owner to owner, and I think in 1515 or somewhere around that, at least in the 1500s, this was sold for scrap, for building materials. So people could come here, take building materials of these walls and take them away. So it is actually quite remarkable that at least these ruins are remaining today. So this site is actually maintained by English Heritage. English Heritage is a charity that maintains all of these castles around England, and this castle is free to enter, but some of the other castles you have to pay. But obviously there's not a lot of castle left actually, as you can see. I mean, it's a nice sunny day, so there are a lot of people here. So there's some information here. Let's see. The castle fit for a king. So Edward III was the first king to see the strategic importance of Hadleigh Castle. It was ideally situated as a base for defending the Thames Estuary against the French raids during the 100 Years' War. This is how the castle looked like back then. This is how it looks like now. And an interesting fact, though, although it says that Edward III fortified this as a strategic position during the 100 Years' War, during the time he actually fortified this castle, there was peace between England and France, so it was quite a peaceful time. So maybe he was getting ready for the next phase of the war, or he was building this strategic location for the future. So that's the Thames Estuary, as you can see. So this castle is in a really good position, high up on a hill, and then you can see all the way down there to the sea. So those days you could have easily seen any invading armies coming from France, because France is over there. So what you can see there is the English Channel. And down there now you can see a high-speed railway line. I mean, for me, coming to place like this, it's a bit like time travel, because when you come here and imagine how this would have been back in the day, and how, you know, people would have gone about their day-to-day work in this place, or how this would have come under attack, or how it would have defended itself. It's quite interesting. It is a sort of time travel that you can do without actually going back in time. I don't know whether you can actually see me because the sun is behind me, but what I'm going to do is get to that place over there. So that's a guard tower, or what is remaining of the guard tower. So it's quite interesting actually that this castle was sold for, so let me go back actually. So after Edward III fortified this then passed on from, it was actually given to a queen, and then this passed on from queen to queen, and finally it was owned by noble families. So it was again passed on from one family to another. At the end, in the 1500s, the family who bought this actually decided to sell this off for scrap. So there it is, as you can see. Let's see whether we can go down here. It's quite a nice place to come for a walk or for a picnic. There you go. You can actually see people having picnics there. There you go. That's the Thames Estuary we saw earlier, and you can even see some wind farms in the distance. So that's it. So let's go back up again. Lots of kids and families. As you can see, there is a like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I keep thinking of food all the time. No, what I meant to say was like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. There is a leaning, I don't know what that is. Probably a guard. It used to be a guard tower. It is leaning because the soil here is actually clay, and because of that, because it is clay, after a while these walls tend to lean like this, and then obviously fall over. Actually, this side of the guard tower is pretty intact. There you go. Right. Let's get away from here. There's a lot of background noise with because it's a nice day. There are a lot of people out and about. Right here we have a lead melting hearth. Lead melting hearth, mid 16th century. There you go. So this is actually what we are looking at here. This used to be the Great Hall during the late 13th century, according to what it says here. I mean, imagine this. You are in the middle of the Great Hall of this palace. Not a palace, a castle really. Let's go and check out what we have here. There are still more. So obviously I don't expect to see any tall walls here, because given that everything was sold for building material. Guard-rope, late 13th century. It's quite interesting actually. Doesn't matter wherever you go in the world, when you get to a castle like this, whether it is here in Europe or in South America or in Asia, most of the foundations and the fortifications, they all look pretty similar. Obviously they're all made out of stone, and it's interesting to see how most of the humans thought alike when it came to building, not just building buildings, but building societies. What do we have here? Site of mid 13th century hall. Okay, so this was actually the site of another hall. So that was probably what we saw over there was probably the Great Hall. And then when was that? That was the late 13th century, and that's mid 13th century. That outer wall is mid 13th century, and that inner wall is the late 13th century. So this probably the Great Hall was bigger, and then they made a smaller wall, smaller hall later on. Let's see what this wall is about. See whether we can find anything. Okay, we are actually in the kitchen. My favorite place in any castle. There you go, side of the kitchen. Oh, I see another board there. Let's go and check out what it says. So we saw the kitchen, we saw the walls of two halls, which is the one right here onto my left, and then this one over here onto my right, and then on the other side it says something else. So let's go and check it out. Oh, that's another guardrobe tower, mid 13th century. So we saw another guardrobe tower on the other side of this. So there must have been, obviously there must have been guard towers in each corner of the castle. So the one that you can see, the one that is standing today, is that one over there. And then I think that leaning wall was probably part of a guard tower as well at one point in time. And then we saw this guard tower here, and then another guard tower wall here. Let's go further up. There's an information board here. Let's go and check it out. So I am here, and that's the high tower. That is the one right here, and South Tower is the one that is standing there. And we saw the two halls earlier, this small hall and the Great Hall, and this is the gate that we came through. The Barbican stables have been here. It has been quite a big castle when it was fully complete. So this is important. Hadleigh Castle was unfortunately built on geologically unstable clay. There were already problems in 1274 when it was said to be badly built and decayed. I think that's probably because of, as it said there, it's because it's built on clay, and that is why that wall you can see over there is leaning, because it's the soil is clay, and obviously it is not going to hold for a long time with the weight of these massive stone walls. We talked about the 100 Years' War earlier, but what actually, for those of you who don't know, what actually caused it, what actually started this 100 Years' War. I'm not going to go into detail and explain the whole start, the ending, and the whole of the 100 Years' War, because it's going to be too long. Obviously it lasted for 100 years, but the main reason it started was the King of England at the time had a claim to the French throne. That is because the king at the time, the English king at the time, was the nephew of the French king. So when the French king died without an heir to the throne, the English king said, I'm now the ruler of France. Obviously the French didn't like it. They refused that, and that led to a war between those two countries, and that went on for several generations. So that's why it lasted for actually 116 years. But for the ease of use, people say 100-year war. So hopefully that's a bit of history. If you didn't know that, that will be useful if you're a nerd like me. Someone is flying a drone. So that's it from Hadleigh Castle. Hope you enjoyed the video and hope you learned something new, and I'm gonna head back home now. So until we meet again with the next video, stay safe. See you soon.